Now we're going to focus on Africa's largest economy. Start it with energy, petroleum. The Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority says the country's daily petrol consumption has fallen by 28% since President Tinubu scrapped fuel subsidies in May. You remember that speech on Inauguration Day before he even got into office. Average daily petrol consumption fell 48.4 million liters in June, down from the previous average of 66.9 million, according to the industry regulator. So, well, there you have it. Let's see now. Umar Dambata, who is the Executive Vice Chair of the Nigerian Communications Commission, has disclosed in an interactive session with stakeholders in the communications media ecosystem held in Lagos just yesterday that total investments into the communications sector rose to $75.6 billion as at the end of 2021. Also, 5G subscriptions, he says it's over 60,000. Okay. Let's look at broadband penetration. And we got to update this because we're still as of January of this year. We've got to get to the NCC's website to get more updates on where we are. So you got to put these two together. So you've got $75 billion of investment coming in as 2021, and I think that's total, right? And 60,000 in subscriptions in 5G. Do you have 5G on your phone? And now you couple that with 48.2% broadband penetration as at January. Shouldn't this number be higher? Also, how many major players do we have in Nigeria providing 5G service? That's another thing. It's only two major telecommunications giants. Now, that's, MTN Nigeria and Bartel, Airtel. And then, of course, there's Mafab, but Mafab hasn't exactly launched anything yet. So, if you think about the need for internet penetration and what this means for the economy, medicine, as far as telemedicine, being able to communicate with medical professionals if you are far away from a hospital. Also education, being able to attend school, classes, online, and so on and so forth. It's very, very necessary that this number increases. In fact, the World Bank, International Monetary Fund, a whole number of institutions have said that you can increase GDP growth if you improve this number. So there is, of course, a plan from the new administration. I believe they said they want to get to 95% of broadband penetration in Nigeria by 2025. The last administration was aiming for 75%, I think, by about 2024. So we are not quite yet there. Now, it's very possible, again, this is January of 2023. This figure could well be over 50%, maybe 51, 52. But if only half of your, as far as the population is concerned, only half of them is getting this. And this mostly is going to be concentrated in urban areas, not rural areas. You've got an issue. All right, let's move to healthcare. Healthcare, are we going to go to? No, healthcare. So, The Guardian, Mr. Emmanuel Efeni on the morning show, the newspaper review, went through, this is the headline in the Guardian newspaper. Medicinal costs have gone up, according to a survey carried out by The Guardian. The Guardian also said that this was supported by medical professionals, have gone up by 150%. Now, you've got to put this side by side with insurance. Yeah, there's the Guardian headline right there. So there it is. That's in today's Guardian. That is the headline. This is part of a cost of living report as far as where things are in Nigeria. Do we have those inflation figures for May? Inflation, of course, double digits for the month of May. We're expecting our inflation figures for June on the 15th of this month. But you got to put all this together. Healthcare costs are rising. Fuel subsidies have been removed. Fuel costs have tripled in Nigeria, and so it's just the little guy or the little girl, many blows to the head. There's an Instagram, in fact, let's talk about food now. There was an Instagram post from Hawa Ndima. She is the daughter of the billionaire, Mr. Ndima, who runs an oil and gas firm. So she posted this up on her Instagram handle. By the way, Instagram now has threads, so maybe she'll put this on threads. But you can see that she says, I sent my people to the market, and as of yesterday, this is 8,000 naira worth of tomatoes. I'm still not over it. Now, we should point out that during the rainy season, supply of tomatoes does kind of fall, and so perhaps, low, economics 101, low supply means that you're going to have increased demand, and then of course that means you're going to have higher prices. So if this is what 8,000 naira gets you for tomatoes, then well, SBM Intelligence has the Jollof Index. It kind of mirrors inflation in Nigeria. And SBM Intelligence, of course, they released this report where they talk about how much it costs to make a pot of jollof rice. This, of course, is the key ingredient. In fact, when we talk a lot about oil in Nigeria and we talk about the raw ingredients that you need to get crude oil, it's almost rather downstream refined petroleum. You put crude oil in, you get refined petroleum. It's like jollof rice. You put tomatoes in, you get jollof rice out. All right, we've got Gospel Obele, CEO of Streetnomics. He's in London, joining us now to discuss this cost of living squeeze. Gospel, good morning to you. Let's quickly start with the telecommunications investment. 75 billion invested in telcos, broadband penetration 48%. Gospel, should we be doing better?
Yes, I mean, we should be doing better. Big ticket issues are how do we, galvanize stakeholder interest across the key elements that hinder for the growth of internet penetration in Nigeria. There's still a lot more that has to be done around digital literacy. How do you build around digital inclusion as well, getting more vulnerable groups to use internet and actually access fast internet, both in semi-urban and urban communities as well. So, yet the top of mind expectation is that this investment will spread across both the core technical and the non-technical fundamentals that would enable or unlock possibilities around inclusion in the mid to long term. And that's the only way we can reach internet penetration in Nigeria at a much more faster and inclusive rate, particularly.
All right, well, Gospel, you're in London. That's why your handsome face is looking so clear this morning. Internet over in the UK is pretty good. In a nation of Nigeria, 200 million plus people, only 2 major telco companies offering 5G. Should we have more players in the sector?
Yeah, I mean, number one is that we need to have more players in the sector. However, the barriers to entry is really high. There is a lot of capital intensive engagement in the sector as well. Again, which borders on how many, people can really pull that off. And let's not forget that it's a very technical, highly specialized industry to deal as well. So these are the critical arguments that make for that high barriers to entry as well. But we need to have more players because by the time you have more players, that's the only position at which you can sort of unlock the markets possibly for growth and development. And that's a big ticket issue right now in terms of how the Nigerian economy can develop and also enable or unlock growth. You need more market players within the scheme of things. All right. So how do you galvanize that institutional representation to ensure there is more competition in that landscape and you have alternatives to deal? Because by the time you have more alternatives or encourage more alternatives, then you get a position where people who provide these services can also sit up and ensure that they're delivering at the level of quality and what's required, to drive that development of the sector and also meet customer satisfaction at the same time.
All right, real quick, Gospel, cost of living. We're just going to lump this all together. That Instagram post on tomatoes, healthcare costs, 150% climb, according to The Guardian. There's an illustration in Business Day of the president squeezing a Nigerian to get tax revenue out of them. Look, what's your summary of where we are with our cost of living crisis in Nigeria right now?
I mean, the truth is the cost of living is global, but the cost of living in Nigeria has also come to stay. This started as a result of those increased narratives around, food inflation over time. When you talk about the Russian-Ukraine war, you talk about all the global events, climate change and all that, and even the flooding situation that happened in Q4 last year. These events ate deeply. Even the elections, the insecurity narratives, and all of these dynamics have impacted deeply on the fundamental. And what's happening is that we are sort of recycling on the poverty trap. So you have more Nigerians jumping into the poverty trap than outside the poverty trap. Not because they're not earning better income, but the core fundamentals of what they need to get past on a daily basis are increasing. So food is increasing, transport is increasing and all that. And then you have a lump sum of incoherent and probably inconsistent policies that has been rolled out recently that are deepening the cost of living narrative. So whilst you have inflation or food inflation going on the rise, you also have an evolving cost of living crisis, which is deepening at the point where you have more Nigerians caught the poverty trap, or more Nigerians who are being embraced into poverty. And also the argument of a shrinking middle class, and even the so-called elite or thriving class are gradually moving into the middle class range. So it's very worrisome, because poverty has taken new levels of engagement. And quote unquote, the rich also cry tells us that it's biting hard across every point of the income value chain, as the case may be, or consumer classes, as you want to think about it. So my guess is it has come to stay. However, we need to pace up on the policies that further, enshrine or deepen the cost of living crisis for the average Nigerian. Like all of these taxes arguments that we have nowadays, the government needs to pace things more critically. But more importantly, think about social investment/intervention programs that help us deal with the root causal elements at a functional level, whilst fixing the structural reforms element that can help us, sort of begin to gain relief, around the cost of living. And if care is not taken, even if inflation drops, the cost of living will still remain.
Gotcha. So that image of the president squeezing that person for more tax revenue, isn't there? Are you sympathetic to the argument from government that there just isn't any money? We have to raise taxes. We got to remove fuel subsidies. We got to raise electricity tariffs. There's no money, gospel. That's what government is saying. I got to squeeze the Nigerian for all they can get.
The argument by government is very valid. And at a level of delivering public service, or at the level of delivering amenities or social services that make sense to the average people, there has to be a level of investment, and the people also need to be able to afford it, in quote unquote. For instance, you have to pay for British gas in the UK, you have to pay for internet and all that, and those things are quite expensive. So technically, the argument by government is really valid, because they need to rake in more revenues and build or amass the strength they need to go into deep dive. However, there are little low-hanging fruits, like cutting down government waste and all of those things that can be fully, done in the short term, and we can, close up the little gaps and leakages we have already existing. However, it's not also enough. The argument is also not valid enough for the series of incoherent or inconsistent policies we found more recently, especially around raising taxes. You're literally raising taxes almost at the same time that you're taking out subsidy, almost at the same time that the government is yet to settle, almost at the same time people are dealing with the shocks and economic imbalances from the CBN policies and all that has been rolled out in the last 1 year. So this is a very wrong time and a wrong approach to reel out policies that are consistently incoherent and may impact on not just the quality of life, but also the prospects, aspirations, and the dreams of people in the land. So how do we manage all of these juggling balls in the air to ensure that government achieves what he wants to achieve? At the same time, you're not putting people at further risk of an increased or worsening state of living. So it's a complex argument, quite honestly, and there is no one size fits solution to the answer. My initial take will be, how do we develop social initiatives or social interventions to ensure that we pace out these policies that are being rolled out, because they have to be rolled out. But then again, how do you manage the excess bits of these policies, especially as they impact on the cost of living and the standard of living? Because what's going to happen is that you're going to grow the market for social vices, because Nigerians are angry, they are hungry, they are unhappy. So that would also impact in the long term what you're trying to achieve, with this whole economic prosperity and raising revenue argument. All right, and people see these things, all right? So government needs to do more in terms of balancing out the risk, as well as looking at the low-hanging fruit within governance, so that reducing government waste and all that to achieve what we need to achieve. I think there are a lot of opportunities around these arguments, however, but it's a very, very complex trade-off to deal, quite honestly.
It's really hard. I wouldn't want to be the president of Nigeria right now. Tough job, but he says nobody should feel sorry for him that he asked for this job. Gospel Obele, CEO Streetnomics Limited. Thank you so much for joining us, economist over in London. Appreciate your time. All right.